Hi, Brian. Thanks for your post. One point that I wanted to talk about that you really touched base on, and I just mentioned briefly in my post and had more thoughts after hearing what you had to say about in your post, was the oil issues that were going on in Iran that created opposition. And it just made me think, like, why would Iran have issues when you would think that the oil would help everyone in the country and there wouldn't be no opposition because of the natural resource that was in such high demand. You think it would benefit everybody in the country. However, that would be a perfect world, and it's not that way, and it does not benefit, and it only benefits the upper class, like you mentioned. Um, and it's obvious that the upper class benefits it in some ways because of the corruption that goes on within the government and in Iran, and people taking money from certain areas. And then it seems as if the lower and middle class and almost all the factors that everybody has talked about for the week, there is a consistent neglect of the lower and middle class, and I think this is where this such high opposition exists in Iran, because the lower and the middle class are um, neglected, and the kind of attention that they need is not given to them. And in some cases, this could be happening in Saudi Arabia. However, I feel like Saudi Arabia tends to help the lower and middle class more than Iran, because we saw in the readings for this week that Saudi Arabia worked for the rights of the illiterate, and we know that the illiterate tends to be people of lower and some middle class, but more specifically lower backgrounds and um, lower class backgrounds, and Saudi Arabia even worked to provide benefits for the women in the country. So I think this is where we see, and I'm trying to argue that the opposition in Iran does not exist in Saudi Arabia because of the two differences between the countries. And I think it's obvious that Iran seems to not focus on the lower and middle class as they should, and it's the upper class that's receiving all the benefits. However, Saudi Arabia does focus better on the lower and middle class, which creates less opposition because, like I've said, we've seen the opposition coming from the lower and middle class in Iran. So if Saudi Arabia is taking better of the lower and middle class in their country, then there's less likely to have that same opposition to exist. So I hope all that makes sense, and I look forward to more of your posts.